Hello, friends. Welcome or welcome back to Get Ready with America. I'm SJ, a certified Jersey girl who somehow always gets sucked back here, so we are totally in my element for the next couple videos. On Tuesday, June 8th, New Jersey and Virginia will be holding primary elections for their statewide and legislative races. Since there's a lot to discuss across both states, this will be a two-part series. So you might be asking, SJ, why didn't you just do a video about each state separately? A couple reasons. First, both states have a similar deadline for voter registration, so I wanted to make sure I touched on both before the deadline. Second, I asked my patrons if they'd like to see more videos talking about more than one state, and one of the two people said they would, so I'm catering to that person. I don't know which friend voted for that, but this is for you. Hey, you can become a patron too and vote on these very important topics. In fact, I'm doing this video today because probably that same person voted for it. What's the saying? Those who show up something something. Anyway, become a patron. Info in the description box. This week, we will focus on the gubernatorial races in both states, then the lieutenant governor and attorney general races in Virginia. We'll end with how to vote in both states. I've included some timestamps in the description box if you want to skip around. Since this week's video will be Virginia heavy, the eye look is inspired by the Virginia state bird, the cardinal. Let's get into it. In New Jersey, registered Democrats and Republicans will vote for their designated nominee to represent the party in November's general election. Incumbent Governor Phil Murphy is running unopposed for the Democratic nomination because the state party always just goes with whoever has the personal wealth to run. Fine, he's better than Chris Christie. On the Republican side, 4 candidates are in the running. The leading candidate is former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, who has been endorsed by all 21 county Republican organizations in the state, as well as a slew of current and former state legislators. He ran 4 years ago, but lost the nomination to then Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno, so it's looking like second time might be the one. Also running is the former mayor of a town I lived in, and I have no idea who this guy is. In my defense, sort of, I was working on a race in another city and not really paying attention to my own town, but I guess this is my way of saying I get it if you're not always paying attention, but let's change that. Like the president VP model, gubernatorial candidates in New Jersey, once nominated, pick a running mate for lieutenant governor. Governor Murphy will run again with his lieutenant governor, Sheila Oliver, and it's likely that a woman will be chosen as the Republicans' running mate because that's how we do it. If you're only here to hear about New Jersey, you can check the description box to skip ahead to how to vote. It's going to be a boring top-level primary here. What can I say? Maybe someday both major state parties won't pool around one candidate out the gate and discourage an actual competition of experience and ideas. In Virginia, things are a bit wilder. Voters are replacing Democratic Governor Ralph Northam, a man whose picture in blackface in his medical school yearbook somehow didn't bring him down, but can't serve back-to-back terms per the state constitution. They are electing a governor and lieutenant governor separately, as well as an attorney general. All voters can vote in the primary and just have to choose which party primary they're voting in. To complicate things, the Republicans already held their convention primary this past weekend to pick their candidates, so it's actually only the Democratic Party primary for these top 3 seats on June 8th. Let's talk about the Republicans first. This past December, the Virginia Republican Party chose to hold a convention of registered delegates to choose their November candidates, as opposed to taking part in the statewide election process, where any registered voter can take part in their election. Many cited wanting to make sure that true Republicans were voting for the candidates, and there's actually something to this. In 2014, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor lost his primary election to a Tea Party candidate, the first Majority Leader to lose a primary ever, and he actually stepped down from office shortly after that. I very much remember hearing Democrats opting to vote in the Republican primary in that district to vote against Cantor, hoping that putting up a Tea Party candidate would give the Democrat a better chance in the general. It didn't work. The district stayed red. For 2021, the party was going to convene at Liberty University to hold the many rounds of voting it takes to get to a nominee earning the majority of votes from the attending body, but weirdly, the most Trumpian candidate, State Senator Amanda Chase, sued the party for planning to break with COVID protocols. The suit was dismissed, but the party still opted to break up the format and allow delegates to cast a ranked choice ballot at one of 37 locations statewide. Ranked choice voting kind of mimics the convention format. Every voter casts an initial vote for their preferred candidate, and if no candidate earns a majority of the votes, they start eliminating candidates with the least amount of votes. So in a second round of counting, tabulators take the ballots from everyone who initially voted for the last place candidate and redistribute their votes to their second choice as indicated on the ballot. They continue this process until a candidate has over 50% of the vote. There are 7 candidates in the race, endorsed by such great stewards of democracy like Michael Flynn, Ken Cuccinelli, Corey Stewart, and Ted Cruz. The most recent polls had 2 different leaders, Trumpian Chase and Glenn Youngkin way on the other side of the spectrum. At the time of this filming, they have not finished counting the votes for the gubernatorial candidates, so I'll probably have an update on that next week in part 2. Now, because I've decided one of my hills to die on is to point out idiosyncrasies in election administration that contribute to voter suppression, I want to point out how this system of selecting the nominee is voter suppression. 53,000 delegates were certified to vote in this convention, compared to up to 400,000 voters who would show up for a state-run primary. By the way, a certified delegate is a registered Republican who filled out a form and filed it with their local party. Initially, there was not really an absentee voting allowance in place, meaning you had to show up to one of the voting locations on the 8th, which was a problem for active duty military and Orthodox Jews. They did fix that. The party is also running this themselves instead of the nonpartisan County Elections Board, who run all other elections. This means that they're taking care of all the counting themselves. There are live feeds of the counting room in a random hotel ballroom to keep tabs on the process if you're curious. And yes, once again, I was watching while writing this. The feed itself has been running since Saturday, and the account that's streaming it was only created on Friday, so it's not necessarily building my confidence in their process. Also, no one is wearing masks. Now, usually, an entity will limit the voting block and control the whole process if they want to ensure a certain outcome in their election. However, if someone asked me if I wanted to take part in hand counting ranked choice voting ballots in a statewide election, I would 100% do that. I want to be in that chaos. As for the Democrats, 5 candidates are running, including former Governor Terry McAuliffe and current Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. McAuliffe is far and away the leading candidate, polling at around 40%, which is substantial in a 5-way race when the next highest percentage is for undecided. He's also carrying the majority of endorsements from current state legislators, as well as Governor Northam, Speaker Pelosi, the Washington Post, and one of the major public workers unions. He's also a white guy who did this job before, so of course people will go for the familiar in these wild times. The only other candidate with an interesting slate of endorsements is Jennifer Carroll Foy, a former state delegate with the backing of organizations like Emily's List, Sunrise Movement, and Working Families Party, as well as two of my personal favorite members of Congress, Katie Porter and Lauren Underwood. I also know a few people on her campaign, so I may be mildly biased. Lieutenant Governor Fairfax is, I guess, in third place, though far behind the undecided. He has no official endorsements, likely because everyone tried to get him to step down in 2018 and 2019 when two women accused him of sexual assault in the early 2000s. And yet, he's still here, so I guess it takes losing embarrassingly in your primary for a guy to step down in Virginia. I also won't pretend to know all the implications around that situation because him being a younger black man in Southern politics comes into play, so I encourage folks to do their own research on that whole thing. For the lieutenant governor race, 6 candidates are running. Hala Ayala received the plum endorsements from Governor Northam and both the Speaker and Majority Leader of the Virginia House of Delegates, where she currently represents the 51st District. Sam Rasool is the child of Palestinian immigrants representing a rural area of Virginia in the House of Delegates with a very cute pet lamb who's been endorsed by Senator Elizabeth Warren, several colleagues in the Virginia House, and organizations like Sunrise Movement. The only polling I've seen has Rasool in the lead, but 64% of respondents were still undecided, so really, it's anyone's game. For Republicans, I think that's what I've been watching folks count on the live feed, so that update will be in next week's video as well. 6 candidates ran, half state delegates, half from the private sector. For the Attorney General race, incumbent Democrat Mark Herring is running for his 3rd term, facing State Delegate Jay Jones for the nomination. Herring did not get the endorsement from Governor Northam, probably because he said Northam should resign for the blackface incident after admitting to also getting in blackface in college, so I'm sure that put a rift in their relationship. Jones received Northam's endorsement along with endorsements from a crap load of his colleagues in the State House and Senate. Both have basically the same platform, and the difference seems to be that Herring is an older white guy that's been pretty good at the job, and Jones is a young black man who would also do a pretty good job. Pushing out Herring seems petty on Northam's part, but progressive on the part of everyone else. The Republican Party did finish counting votes on this race, and either Herring or Jones will face State Delegate Jason Miyares in November. I'll insert a vote breakdown here so you can see all 3 rounds of voting that took place. Miyares is the first Cuban American to be elected to the Virginia General Assembly, and he vows to protect the rule of law in Virginia. Since we're on the topic of Virginia, let's talk about how to vote there first. As I mentioned before, it's an open primary, so you just have to be registered to vote in Virginia in order to vote, and you pick which party primary to participate in at the polls. The deadline to register is Monday, May 17th. You can register to vote online in conjunction with the state's DMV system, but I couldn't find out how that worked if they don't have a signature on file to check without perjuring myself. Early in-person voting has already started at your local registrar's office or a satellite office and ends on June 5th. Everyone is able to vote early, and you can find times and locations on your county's website. Absentee vote by mail is also available to all. The deadline to request a ballot is Friday, May 28th at 5 p.m. If you're voting on June 8th, polls are open 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. ID is required when voting in person, early, or on election day. I've of course linked the Virginia Department of Elections website in the description box. Their voter participation campaign branding is Virginia is for Lovers, which is clearly the new winner. Sorry, go vote.
Hi, Editing Estray here. I obviously meant Virginia is for voters. I was so excited to say that too. This is why I need to review every take.
Now finally, circling back to New Jersey. The voter registration deadline is Tuesday, May 18th, and you must register as a Democrat or Republican in order to participate on the 8th. New Jersey created a really handy app that has the same info as their online voter portal, and you can register to vote right on there. I actually wish I recorded the moment I figured this out so that you could see my true unbridled excitement. New Jersey is not doing in-person voting for the primary, but anyone can still apply for a vote by mail ballot. Last year, for both the primary and general, because of COVID, the state automatically sent a ballot to every registered voter, and they're not doing that this year, so you must still apply. I neglected to capture footage of me filling out my own ballot for this, so here's a photo shoot of me with my ballot instead. I promise this is not why I'm single. The deadline to apply for a mail-in ballot is June 1st, or you can apply in person at your county clerk's office through June 7th at 3 p.m. Ballots must be postmarked by June 8th, but will be counted if it's received within 6 days of Election Day. This ain't Pennsylvania. There are also drop boxes around the state, but the one I went to the other day was locked, so you might want to check the status in your own area. If you vote on June 8th, polls are open 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can check your registration status and polling location online or on the app linked in the description box below. Voter participation campaign branding is New Jersey Votes, and frankly, I'm disappointed. This is the state that was stronger than the storm. We're more creative than this. That's it, folks. Did you ever think that when talking politics about New Jersey and another state, that Jersey would be less interesting? Just another gubernatorial year, I suppose. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel to learn more about voting in other states. If you're enjoying this series and want to take part in more very important polls on what I should film, please check out my Patreon in the description box. Come back next week for part 2, talking about the state legislature races and whatever else is on the ballot in Virginia, because not in New Jersey. I'll see you then.